Welcome to this special edition of the Barefoot Bushcraft Radio Show. Today is Saturday, May 31st, 2014, and we are live worldwide. Also airing in syndication on iTunes at Freedomizer Radio. On this week's broadcast, the Wolfman and Rhonda come to us live directly from the 2014 Headwaters Gathering in Kimbercote, Ontario. And now let's introduce our host, the Wolfman.
Hello and welcome, everyone, to this special edition of the Barefoot Bushcraft Radio Show, live from the Headwaters Gathering on the Kimbercote Farms in Kimbercote, Ontario. And this is the second year we've broadcast live from the gathering, and we've assembled a whole bunch of really amazing people from the gathering who are going to tell us what the gathering is about and to tell us a little bit about the gathering itself. So actually, I have our first guest right here, and his name is Garen, and we will bring him on.
Hello. Yeah, my name is Garen Carter. I've been doing the volunteer crew for Headwaters here for the last couple of years, heading up that crew.
Hi, Garrett. Let me introduce myself. I am AD Venture, and I thank you for joining us here on the Barefoot Bushcraft Radio Show. So how's this weekend been so far? How has Headwaters been this year?
Oh, it's been amazing. It's always a great time, but this year I think I've enjoyed more than most. Especially I work with all the volunteers, and it is a completely volunteer-run event. So there's a lot to do, but there's many hands, and it makes for light work and has made my job fairly easy. Just a great group of people doing a lot of really great skills.
So can you go a little further into detail as to what you've been up to so far at Headwaters Gathering?
As far as the programs or the workshops you're asking about?
Yeah, absolutely. I'd love to hear about that. Unfortunately, this year I had to stay behind and make sure that the show went off without a hitch. But as always, I'm living a little vicariously through the Wolfman and Rhonda, and always love to know what's going on there.
For sure. It's a pretty wide set of skills going on here everywhere. Everything from making salves and medicines out of natural plants to there's some self-defense courses to archery and song circles and lots of bushcraft, survival skills, plant walks. Yeah, it's a very wide field of topics taught by some really great presenters.
And have you been involved directly with any workshops in particular?
I haven't taught any of the workshops this year. I did some friction fire ones last year. This year I've been focusing more on getting the volunteer crews running well. Actually, I've gotten the chance to take some this year, which has been a big change. It's really nice to have the time to do that. I've gotten out and to do some tracking workshops and some bushcraft skills ones as well.
Well, that's great. At least you got some chance to do that, because I know from personal experience there that just coordinating all the logistics is quite a challenge with all those people.
Oh, for sure. We have people coming from all over North America to present and attend, and that's being a volunteer crew, completely volunteer run. Everyone's kind of doing this in their spare time, so it's amazing the work we get done when we all work together.
That's absolutely true. Well, there's still about a day and a half, I guess, left with the Headwaters Gathering. And is there anything else planned for later tonight or tomorrow that you'd like to speak about here on the radio show?
Oh, for sure. Tonight's the big night. Two of the highlights, my favorite parts. First coming up is we're having a potluck shortly. When you have about 200 and 250 people on site, you're all bringing different dishes. Just wonderful treats, all set out on tables that everyone gets to just kind of go crazy and grab whatever you want. And the food is always spectacular on the potluck night. And then following up we do a train blanket where people bring things they've made or just interesting items, and you set it out on a blanket, and then everyone else brings forward items they brought to trade, and they get the person who set up the original item gets the pick from what was offered, and it's always fun. There's always plenty of humor along with it too. So that's the rest of this night, which will be very exciting. And then tomorrow, I'm looking forward to the archery contest.
Yeah, that's always a fun event there at the Headwaters Gathering. Now, the Wolfman is telling me that we've got another guest, so thank you again for joining us here on the Barefoot Bushcraft Radio Show, and we really hope that you enjoy the rest of your weekend there.
I will do. Thank you very much.
All right, and I will introduce our next guest, which is a very special person who we've been trying to get on the show for a little while. His name is Doug Getgood, and I will hand it over to you, AD, and I will put him on the line.
All right, we have a very special guest on this very special edition of the Barefoot Bushcraft Radio Show, someone that we've been trying very hard to get here on this show, and you deserve a very special clip for you.
Hi.
Thank you so much for joining us here.
Thank you.
Well, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself and let the audience know what the Wolfman and I are so excited about.
Name's Doug. Just probably about my 6th year coming out to the gathering. It's just nice to see all the different age people. I try to teach where I can.
And can you share a little more about your background and what you do?
Let's see, I've been teaching survival since about 1995. I had my 2001, between 2002, I went off up north of Thunder Bay and spent a year alone. It wasn't what I'd call survival, but it was a good chance to get in touch with myself, as well as do a lot of preparation for my year's worth of food and health and clothing and all that kind of stuff. It was very nice to get away and practice some of the skills. Again, I wasn't out living hand to mouth. It was nice to get out there and just gain a sense of self-discovery.
So, Doug, can you tell us a little more on your thoughts of the spiritual connection with bushcraft?
Spiritual connection, I think it's all personal for every particular person. You're almost getting away from all the background noise. Even if you're just carving a spoon or making a craft, you get a chance to focus. It's almost can be like a meditation. You're just, I think if you're doing TV or around a lot of people, you're listening to everyone else's thoughts or ideas. Or at that time alone, you're just connecting to each of your own thoughts. I know it's really hard to explain. I know for myself, the mind slows down the busy activeness, and you just get inspired for things. In an odd way, I was actually starting to see almost a connection to the outdoors. I'd look at my hands, and I'd see like a glow, and then if I followed that far enough, I could see that glow connecting to a tree or something else. It sounds kind of odd, but that was a really surprise for me. Again, with aloneness time, whether it's a mind going different places, I'd almost start hearing drumming or chanting in the distance, and it was just nice to connect with that voice of the outdoors. I don't know if that's quite answering your question, but just to slow down and focus with the bushcraft side again. It's you're not so high tech. You don't have your tent, you don't have your equipment so much. I spent a winter once in a debris hut, which is like a shelter made out of twigs and it looks like an A with a long ridge pole. Had a grass mat. Just every night, just be able to sink within the earth and almost let your troubles yourself disappear. You're cold. You can see your breath in your shelters. When I learned that particular shelter, I was told to keep me alive all winter or warm all winter. So I said, well, let me try that out. So I basically went in just the suburbs of Toronto, went in a local valley, built a shelter, and I didn't live there per se, but I just slept that winter and went to work in the daytime. I tested myself out with a sleeping bag that was good for 5 degrees above freezing, and that shelter kept me warm all winter. So the bag I had wasn't even suitable for the conditions I was at. So it's just, I don't know, it's just connections. People try these things in different levels.
That sounds incredibly fascinating. So, Doug, can you let us know what you're presenting this year at the Headwaters Gathering?
Presenting this year, I did what I call the first half of the survival walk. I try to teach a bit more modern stuff in a way. So instead of which people are learning how to rub two sticks together, I went out and showed them, how to start fire almost instantly using some more modern techniques with magnesium sticks or ferro rods. This winter, we actually built a shelter just out of a poncho and a reflective blanket and a sheet of plastic, and that kept me warm at 20 below in my T-shirt. Phenomenal. The heat gets in there. It doesn't escape because it gets trapped within the mylar and the plastic. So I taught that shelter. So I'm not trying to teach so much the primitive skills at these gatherings. I'm trying to teach things that you can adapt to really fast and focus on quickly. Because that's me. What I try to teach more survival for emergencies than so much than primitive living. So that was my morning. We did the fire, show some emergency traps, what someone could do if they're lost. And then this afternoon, I was teaching rope knots, which people, once you start tying knots, you realize how good they are. Anywhere from, knots back in the early lifestyles, knots freed our hands so we could carry things. We keep our hands free for building, for defense, whatever that case is. Knots for sailing. It's about knots. The whole world's tied together by knots, basically. And then even I'd also taught string figures. People think of them as like a cat's cradles, but string figures are one of those skills that are used all over the world, whether it's the Inuit, the Aboriginals. We think in North America as cat's cradles. I think people were surprised learning just a simple string game or string figure of how mobile their hands become. You get them stretching and flexibility to them, and just the fact of doing string figures, it makes your left hand work the same speed as your right hand, or both hands work different dimensions kind of thing, and it just opens up new almost neural pathways. It's a nice way of connecting to just a piece of string, and you don't have to carry much with you, and you keep yourself entertained if you cold night kind of thing. So I enjoyed doing that. I enjoyed this first year here I've taught string figures, and I think a lot of people were surprised how much they could learn from it.
Oh, that sounds like so much fun, and I would have loved to have been there to experience that. But nonetheless, I was going to ask you, can you share with our audience a method for them to contact you or learn a little more about you?
If they want to see about the year, I didn't go out there to really share it with the public, but a friend of mine, actually he asked, originally he didn't want his name involved in it because he thought the quality of it was not as good. But a friend of mine, Les Stroud, he visited me out there a couple of times, and he did some filming of my year. So if they want to go on my name, Doug Getgood, a year in the Northern Wilderness, then get a 10 minutes on. It's hard to put 10 minutes into a year, but there's a 10 minutes kind of my day-to-day life. They can see that. I also do a little bit of teaching through United Survival Network of Ontario. It's part of a meetup group. I think it's usno.ca or something like that. And we just teach, basically volunteer our services, our love, and try to teach them outdoor skills. So also, if you want to see the string game, my name balanced on a string after that, and you can see the string game I'm talking about. So actually, I combine it into a story talking about our early connection to the earth.
Oh, I would very much love to join you on one of those events. It sounds extremely fascinating, especially how you were speaking just prior about making use of what you have and surviving and basically being out in the elements. And that's something that really fascinates me, especially because we're surrounded by all this material that don't consider useful and never considered in that viewpoint unless they're shown that. And that's something that I really am fascinated by and extremely interested in, and love the fact that you're quite involved with that.
And what was kind of neat, again, all my life pretty goes back to the year. It's almost, it's not hokey like Born Again, but it's an inspiring spot. And being that I flew everything I needed up in that area, eventually, any little bit of garbage I had a tin can, I would almost get to the thing is, okay, what do I have and what can I make out of that? or what do I need and what's here that I can use. And so a tin can, I start making cups. Another tin can, I made a dustpan. Old stovepipe, I made a nice portable wood stove which collapsed down to about an inch thick to start moving around. I went by a fishing camp in the fall, and I found where someone had accidentally dropped a handful of screws and nails, and that was like gold mine to me. Just to take it back and be able to use that for my cabin. Like where I moved, there was an old abandoned cabin from about 20 years earlier, and as it was falling apart in the side, I was actually pulling apart the rafters and grabbing all the old nails and banging them out and straightening them and reusing them. So it was nice to get that mentality where everything we have is precious. The stuff we think is just a piece of glass or a tin can that we toss in the dump. If there's ever a scenario where we can't make those again, that stuff becomes our gold mine. I mean, you look at when the Europeans came to North America, the first things a lot of people wanted to trade for was sewing pins, pots, axes, knives. That stuff's just, and I realize that so much out there when it's not near you, how any piece of metal, any piece of junk we think is just junk, it's just, you just get your mind going. It's so precious to you. Yeah, it really takes away from that throwaway society.
Well, Doug, sorry about the technical difficulties there, but thank you so much for joining us here on the Barefoot Bushcraft radio show. And we're just going to bring on a new guest here, but we look forward to having you back on the show.
Our next guest is Daniel, and Daniel has been on the show before. He was talking to us last year about some of his experiences, so welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you very much. Glad to be here.
So, Daniel, how has your experience at the Headwaters Gathering this year been?
Oh, it's been pretty full on. I was, me and a friend, we brought a moose hide up, and we tanned her yesterday, and got her. That was all day yesterday. Got her smoked this morning, and then I was even teaching another little workshop, or actually it was a talk on how to care for animals long after they're dead, I guess is how I'd say it. So it's been very good. Yeah, I think so.
Have you participated in any other workshops there so far?
No, I was just teaching those ones as a matter of fact. The moose hide was a pretty full on affair, and then there was the talk this afternoon. So I've just been talking to folks and doing that really.
Sounds like you've been quite busy there. Has it been a good showing of people there?
Generally, yes. I mean, I was hoping there'd be a few more for the moose hide tanning thing, but it was all day, and I guess a lot of folks are wanting to go to more than one workshop and learn things that are a little more perhaps backyard amenable than is a moose hide. So fair enough. But we had a few dedicated folks that came out, and we really went at it, and we wondered a lot about moose themselves and what it is that we owe them in terms of how they feed us if we're so lucky to eat moose meat, and certainly to clothe ourselves in the beautiful leather that is part of her gift, I guess. And even as I speak right now, I'm wearing a moose hide vest that I'm lucky enough to have sewn up, and it's something that's very near and dear to my heart. Is not only making beauty of these animals that I'm fortunate enough have come my way, but really caring for them and making sure that as best I can, and I guess as little as I'm able to as one guy, to make sure that if at all possible, if wherever she may be, that her soul is in some way cared for.
That's quite an interesting philosophy that you have there.
Yeah, I find it's very important, I think. It's very important, and certainly I find it interesting. I enjoy wondering about it all the time, as a matter of fact.
So did you bring anything interesting for the potluck that's going to be held there later tonight?
I've got some eggs from my farm. I may or may not have more sausage left from... I'm a farmer, so that's most of what I've tried to bring, and not a terrible amount of vegetables yet this year. I'm from a little further north than here, so we don't have too many crops or vegetables up, and I don't know about sort of quote-unquote terribly interesting, but good food. nonetheless. And I had about 20 Toblerone bars that somehow came my way, and I was just handing those out about 5 minutes ago.
So, Daniel, you've led some interesting workshops there, according to the Wolfman. One of them is called Caring for an Animal After the Fact. Could you share with our audience some more details about that workshop?
I'd be happy to, yes. I was hoping you'd ask that. That's something that I find it's too rarely wondered about. You know, it's all fair and good, and most of us know the language around honoring animals and such as it goes, while their meat or while their skin or while their bones are in our presence, or at least hopefully we're taking care of that on our end here. But what about the fact that, and not only wild animals, but what about the fact that our lives have been granted to us by the death of many, many animals as far as things have gone in my 28 years on this earth? And what is it that we owe them? And that's what I was trying to wonder about, not to have any specific answers to that, but to raise the issue of what do we owe specifically to the animals, but more generally, to this sweet and bountiful world that, at least for this time, is ours to care for as best we can. And I find that it's all too rarely wondered about, and deserves a place amongst all the primitive skills that are being taught here. The perhaps fundamental primitive skill about wondering about our humanity and what is asked of us by being alive and on the receiving end of all the blessings that we call food and air and sunlight and water and many, many more things.
So as a farmer, Daniel, can you tell us perhaps a little more as to your insights as to why there's such a disconnect between people who go and buy their produce there in the market and those that actually grow it, like yourself? Because there seems to be, in my personal opinion, quite a few people, unfortunately they seem to be centered in urban areas mostly, but they seem to have lack of understanding as to the amount of work that goes into producing these sorts of goods, but also the method to have to distribute them and the potential pollution that's caused by that, and the fact that they might be getting products that might be subpar, because after all, if you're going to ship something from halfway around the world, it can't be ripe when you send it. So what does that do?
Oh, absolutely.
To actual produce?
Well, I mean, sure, I'd happily try and answer that question, I guess, briefly here. People are all too willing to buy into the notion that life's supposed to be easy and comfortable and, sort of sunshining all the time. And, of course, there's a lot of historical prejudices against people on the land and historical, for lack of a better word, traumas about the said land being stolen from us or us being enslaved upon the land. And so basically a lot of people, and not only in the cities, unfortunately, seem to be in some kind of headlong flight from an agrarian or any sort of land-based life. And it's certainly a lot of work. And, nowadays, as I'm sure you've well observed yourself, people are not very inclined towards work, and it asks a lot of people to grow and to, if it's animals we're talking about, to slaughter their own food, and it's hard on you. I think it asks a lot in terms of our humanity to account for our expense on the world, and it's much easier for people to pay somebody else to do their dirty work, frankly.
That is so true. However, I do have to say that, in my opinion, it seems also to be that because people are so technocentric these days and never going out to the wilderness, or at least outside, there's that disconnect with nature itself. And I have great adventures and great enjoyment from gardening. And you have this great feeling afterwards of accomplishment, of giving back, but also of seeing your creation grow. or at least seen something we've helped nurture, grow, and flourish. And I feel that particular feeling within people is currently numbed or lost because of the total technocentric society that we are focused on.
It certainly seems to be the case. Yeah. I mean, beyond how it may or may not feel for folks, I mean, certainly there's absolutely, it sounds like the easiest case to make. You know, you go outside and you feel better, but sort of the enlightened self-interest model doesn't seem to be working. And beyond how it makes us feel, I mean, look at the effects upon this grand earth that we live upon, where people don't know, like you say, you know, where their food comes, and there's this huge disconnect that doesn't manifest primarily in our inability to feel good about our place on the earth, but it manifests primarily in the destruction that seems to be to follow at least our culture wherever we tromp.
Now, Daniel, before we have to cut to commercials here on the Barefoot Bushcraft radio show, is there any method for our audience to contact you or to learn more about you?
Not really. No, I'm working on it.
Nonetheless,
next
we would
year
love to have you back on the show in the future. And in that time, maybe there's a chance for you to have something set up, so we look forward to that.
Okay. I'll work on it, and I'll talk to you next year.
And that's something else for our audience to know, that if they do want to learn more about you, they can always go to the 2015 Headwaters Gathering.
Exactly. Yep.
All
okay,
right,
well, thank you so much for having me on.
Joining us here. This is A.D. Venture, joined by the Wolfman and Rhonda Ursulak, and we'll see you on the other side. Welcome back to the second half of the Barefoot Bushcraft radio show for Saturday, May 31st, 2014, a special edition of the show coming direct from the Headwaters Gathering. This is your host, A.D. Venture, with the Wolfman and Rhonda Ursulak working behind the scenes this week, and we're going to welcome our special guest.
Yeah, so our next special guest is Carly, and we've been wanting to have Carly on the show for a while as well, and she has a very strong connection between nature connection and song. So I'm going to pass the phone over to her, and she will tell you a little bit more about that, and possibly even give us a song I would really love. So we'll just pass her right over.
Hi there.
Hi, Carly J. Thank you so much for joining us here on the Barefoot Bushcraft radio show.
Oh, absolutely no problem. Thank you for having me.
So please, why don't you share with our audience a little more about you and what you do?
Okay. Well, I'm a musician slash naturalist, I guess, and I've been working in this community called the Art of Mentoring community for the last 5 or 6 years, mentoring youth in nature connection, and just really working to kind of build relationships, support people to build relationships between themselves and the natural world, and not necessarily teaching them, but more kind of supporting them to remember that they are a part of nature. And so for me, music has always been a huge part of my life, and I really believe that it's like a part of our DNA. If I look at some of the communities that are living closely to the land, or that have traditionally lived closely to the land in the past, not only are they practicing certain like earth-based skills and all that, but there's a huge component of music. And it's not like the Whitney Houston style of music, you know what I mean? Like everyone thinks that they need to sound like Whitney or Mariah to be a singer, but it's just singing together in community about the land, the stories of your people and your journey here on Earth. And so connecting music and nature is a big passion of mine.
And that's another reason why we've been wanting to get you on the show for quite some time. There's quite a few topics in what you just said alone that we could speak literally hours about. So As we've mentioned quite a few times here on the show, not in just this broadcast alone, but during our 2 seasons on the air, we've talked a fair bit about nature connection. However, I think it would be great if you, as Carly J, work quite thoroughly with nature connection. If you could explain to our audience a little more about that and why it's so important.
Sure. I feel like there have been a lot of different strategies to attack the current cultural and environmental problems that we see today. Poverty and changing climate, and even just where people's hearts and minds are at, and I think that they're all part of a big picture. There needs to be the people on the front lines that are being the activists in the streets, and there needs to be the medical professionals that are looking at our health in those scientific terms. But I also feel like a part that wasn't necessarily being looked at for a long time until recently was how much impact our disconnect from our natural way of being has played out into the current state of our world. So, in my opinion, one of the biggest kind of, I don't like to talk doomsday or too negative, but one of the biggest factors that I see that's putting our culture in kind of a mess is the fact that we're no longer doing the things that we were kind of born to do, like touching the earth and living with the natural cycles, and even like waking up with the sun and going to bed with the sun, or breathing fresh air, or spending time where we're not sitting in front of a screen, or kids sitting at desks all the time. So if anything that we can do to go back to our kind of original instructions, to me, that's connecting to nature. That's reminding us of our pure selves. And yeah, there's a need for technology today, and I think that it's beautiful where we've come, and I don't think that we should all go back and necessarily live in the ways that our ancestors did, because we can't forget. We can't completely say, okay, we're just going to go off the grid. But I think that the nature connection movement is kind of bridging that gap between what used to be and when we were living more connected lives and what we have today. And there's a lot of people out there that are doing amazing work in that field, and Headwaters is a beautiful example of that. And you guys being here at Headwaters is an amazing example of that. There's people outside learning to light fires without matches, and there's people outside that are tanning deer hides with just natural materials, and singing around a campfire. And here we are speaking on these crazy looking devices into this amazing radio show that's broadcasting who knows where. So I see that as a beautiful merger of those two worlds.
Now, Carly, you spoke a little bit about music, and you spoke about tribal music specifically. Now, how is that different from modern music?
Well, I guess there's a couple of ways to answer that. I think, in our community, we've reclaimed music in a really beautiful way. And people that would say that they're not a singer, oh, I never sing, I only sing in the shower, I don't want anyone to hear me sing, are now coming together in a group and letting that voice out. And I think a lot of people have been told, I've had a lot of people tell me that their teacher told them not to sing, in choir. They're like, can you just lip sync? Can you just mouth those words, honey? You're just not born a singer. And I think that's such a shame. I think that everyone is born a singer, and it's just the same as, it's at the same level as needing to play as a child, needing to sing. And so, tribal music or music about the land is different than some of the pop music that we're seeing today. And don't get me wrong, I like some of the music that's coming out today, but it's telling a story of a community, and the pop music that's coming out today is kind of telling a very individualistic story that's perpetuating the idea that we are alone, that that we need to have ourselves seen, that we need to be, recognized, and that whole ego-based mentality. And the songs that we sing here are about the land. There's nobody's voices being heard over another, and there's something that happens inside people when they sing together in community. It's magic, it's energetic, maybe it's physiological. Maybe somebody will study it one day and say, oh, actually, this is doing something, some serious healing work in our bodies as we sing. That's what I think.
Now, the Wolfman is communicating to me through direct electronic message, and he's actually asking me to ask you a question, and that is, do you have a favorite tribal song, and if so, do you know the history of it?
I have a lot of favorite songs, and to tell you the truth, the songs that I've been singing with my community lately are not tribal songs in the sense that they came from a tribe that lives closely to the land. They're songs that we're writing that tell our story of reconnecting and remembering that connection to the land. So I guess I have a couple that come up right now. There's one song that's been floating around our community lately that is having a pretty big impact kind of internationally in this nature connection scene. And it doesn't really have a name, but it's a song, I guess people are calling it the Elderberry song. And the story is that myself and another person, two total strangers, were both studying with herbalists in different sides of the country, and both were my side of the story is that I was looking for a song that I could sing while harvesting plants and while working with plants, and a song came to me. It popped into my head, no words, just it really actually did feel kind of tribal. It felt like original music to me. And it was one of those moments where I realized that I didn't actually write that song, that I was just kind of singing of the vibe of the land without kind of sounding too much like a hippie, but that's the message that I got. And I realized that at the bottom of this garden was this enormous black elder tree, which is a tree of myth in many cultures. It's a tree, actually it's a shrub that holds a lot of kind of sacred identity to a lot of different peoples around the world. And so I started singing it as the Elderberry song. And slowly and surely I met some other people and found out that this man in Washington had a very similar story, and he sang me his song and I sang him my song, and we put those two songs on top of each other, and that song is now being sung in Germany, in the States, at different gatherings, and it's bringing people together in a really beautiful way. And all it is just sounds. Like it doesn't necessarily have to be more than that at all. It's people coming together, singing, joining their voices, and there's something absolutely powerful about that.
That's incredible. Now, the very, very first time I met you was at a Mark Morey event, and you sang some beautiful, beautiful songs there. So if it's not putting you on the spot too much, I would love to ask you to sing us one of those songs, like the one you were just speaking about, because I'm sure our listeners would really feel a really powerful connection with the song because they're just so beautiful.
Okay. Maybe I could sing a couple songs. I'll sing the Elderberry song. And I guess I'm hesitant about that because it really sounds kind of best when the two parts are coming together and when you're singing in group. And so I guess the audience might get a bit of an image of, like just hearing the power of the song, and then maybe hearing me sing it on my own might have two different feelings to it because the power really is singing it with other people. But I'll share it, and it's something that I would love if listeners would want to, take home and sing on their own if they're gardeners or working with plants or plant medicine. It's a pretty easy kind of little ditty, and this is the female part of the song, and it goes very, very simple and very short. It's just something you would hum in your head while you're in your garden. It goes, ooh yeah yeah, 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 ooh yeah yeah. Ooh, yeah. Just like that.
Very beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing that with us.
Hey, no problem.
Now, before we move on to our next guest, is there any way for our listeners to learn a little more about you?
I'm working on some projects currently, music projects and website projects and stuff like that. But maybe I can share my contact information with you folks at the station, and if people are interested, they can contact me directly.
Well, that would be absolutely great, and we would love to have you back on the show just to learn a little more about what's going on with you and to speak a lot more about those topics that you were previously discussing.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you so much for being on the show, Carly. You have a great day and enjoy the rest of Headwater.
All right. Okay, so I am going to introduce our next guest, and he is a professional blacksmith. And here at Headwaters, he has this whole blacksmith stuff set up, and it's everything from like a forge, and he has sample knives and works with Damascus steel, and just stunning work. So what we will do is we are going to put him on in just a moment because we just experienced a bit of a technical difficulty because we are broadcasting live. But we can talk a little bit more about the Headwaters Gathering until that happens. And so the Headwaters Gathering is a primitive skills gathering that happens once a year in Ontario, in central Ontario, Canada. And the area is it's called the Headwaters area because all of the Great Lakes sort of converge their waters into this area. And it has some of the cleanest drinking water in the world. So it's a pretty amazing place to visit. To describe the facility itself, it was an old farm that was converted into a spiritual retreat. So it's an amazing place. So with that, we will go ahead here and we will introduce our new guest. This is a gentleman named Daniel.
Well, thank you very much for joining us here on the Barefoot Bushcraft radio show. How have you been enjoying the Headwaters Gathering this weekend?
It's been very warm, especially by the forge.
Now, just to let our audience know, I've met Daniel here one time at the Headwaters Gathering. I've seen his wares, and I've seen his work, and it's absolutely incredible. Very intriguing, and it's just so fascinating to watch him work and just to see the products of his blood, sweat, and tears. It's absolutely great to see. And can you tell us a little more about all the different objects and devices that you create through your forge?
Sure. Today, what I brought is a little draw knife that I made. It's out of 5160 steel, which is a high carbon tool steel. It was once part of a Ford truck spring, and I forged that down into a draw knife for doing some of the work on a deadhead horse that they have here. Some of the other items I made are some of the tomahawks and some different style knives.
It sounds absolutely incredible. It's quite unfortunate that I wasn't able to make it up there to the Headwaters Gathering this year, and I know that you probably got some beautiful wares there available for sale.
Yeah, some of the items were for sale, and what I did specifically here today, I made some medieval arrow heads for the people to see, and I sold a few of those.
Now, if our audience wants to learn a little more about the work that you do or see some of the wares that you create, what can they do? Is there a specific website that they can check out?
Yeah, forgedlink.com is my website. Or they could go to Daniel Linkenheld. Last name is Linkenheld, and friend me on Facebook. I usually post pretty well everything I make there, and they can also check out Forged Link on Facebook, I have galleries there that they can look at.
So I know there's a huge difference between the process that you use to create knives versus like your standard K-bar military issue knife. Could you tell us the difference between like, you know, your drop forged standard steel blade and some of the creations that you put together?
Well, what happens with a lot of the manufactured knives is they come out of a cookie cutter sheet, and then they're machine ground to a certain profile, and then they go through their heat treating process. That differs in what I do. In most blacksmiths and bladesmiths take a piece of high carbon steel, and it's usually a simple high carbon steel, and they hammer forge it to a specific shape. Now that packs down grain on the edge of the blade, which makes it pretty durable. And we go through our heat treating process. We refine the grain to make it like a very, very fine grain in the cutting edge. And then afterwards, we'll go through our heat treat processes where we'll drop it in oil to harden it off, and then usually temper it off in about an oven at 400 degrees for about an hour. Now that process causes the steel to be very good in far as functionality, between a balance between edge hardness and toughness. And the manufactured knives don't do this, and consequently the knives or any edge tool that it's made like that ends up having a lot better edge wear.
So that sounds like completely different than the kind of stuff that you buy. And I would imagine that the quality, people can go on your website, obviously, and they can have a look at your creations. So what got you started? What got you interested in doing this sort of thing? Was it like a lifelong thing, or did you get into it fairly recently?
What happened a few years ago, I also carve wood, and I came up against a block wall, whereas I couldn't find a chisel I needed to do certain types of work. And I was carving Celtic knots at the time, and I needed a double bevel undercut, like spear point profile on a chisel. Well, that was not made anywhere. So my wife saw my frustration. She says, "What do you need?" And I said, "Well, I need a blacksmith to make me this specific tool with this specific design." So what ended up happening is she bought me a course at Christmas with a blacksmith, and I haven't looked back since.
Wow, that's truly amazing. Now, you do inlay work as well, and what it looks like, to the average person who's examining it, is it just looks like you have taken a little piece of wire and hammered it into the wood. But you've explained that it's a totally different process when you see the metal inlays and like the beautiful scroll work in the actual wood. Could you tell us a little about that?
Sure. Like on a lot of the handles on my knives, what I do is a silver wire inlay, and it's sterling silver wire. It's 11 thou by 55 thou in size. And what I've done is actually made very, very small chisels. They're not more than about a 30 second width on it. And I draw a pattern that I want to make on a piece of wood. And then these chisels are inserted perpendicular to the surface and traced. So they're overlapping cuts, and they're so narrow because of the curve, so that you don't get hard edges, and it's just a flowing curve. So then I chisel out all these curves by hand with this little wee tiny chisel, and then I start at one end and lay in the silver wire and tap it in with a hammer. After that's all been done, what I do is I apply a wood dye, or usually an alcohol-based dye, on the wood. The wood then swells up, and it basically pinches the silver wire right in place. Then I sand it clean so that both surfaces match perfectly. And I apply another coat of dye and sand it again. And more so than looking at it by eye, I feel it to see that I have no burrs or anything on it. Then I'll finish it off with several coats of linseed oil, and then I'll burnish it up after that on a wheel.
That's incredible, and again, it is definitely worth going on to onto your website and viewing some of these. And you can't really describe how beautiful they are. even in photographs. You have to totally see them. So on that note, I would like to thank you for coming on the show. We are going to Rhonda and I are going to talk a little bit about the gathering, and we are sort of going to take the show out because we're running out of time.
Well, thanks very much for your time. Okay.
All right. So again, this is the 2014 Headwaters Gathering. So now we haven't really heard a whole lot from Rhonda because she has been just running herself ragged trying to find some of the most amazing guests and coordinate some appearances on the show. So Rhonda, why don't you tell us a little bit about the show in the last couple of minutes?
Yeah, it's been great. I have, it's nice to see familiar faces. It's always nice to come back into this community and be welcomed and see smiling faces and familiar faces. So I've really enjoyed asking, the people that I've connected over the last 4 years here at Headwaters to come on the show. And I'm looking forward to, I hope everyone had a good time just listening to what they had to say and what they did and what kind of skills they had to share with the community here at Headwaters, which is what Headwaters is all about. It's just about people that come together and share the skills they have with the people that gather here. I, along with 2 other women, we shared our skills with other women with our bow drill workshop. So we offered a women's only container where we could coach and show how to use a bow drill and create fire by friction. So that was really nice to be able to share that skill with everyone as well. So it's been really, really great.
Well, it's been absolutely spectacular to hear from everyone there at the Headwaters Gathering for 2014. Unfortunately, we've reached that point of the show where we're going to have to cut everyone off and end the show. This is A.D. Venture, joined by the Wolfman and Rhonda Ursulak, and we look forward to hearing from you next week on the Barefoot Bushcraft Radio Show.